Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply, and this video is to discuss what is the difference between a hinge that's made for a square edge door versus a hinge that's meant for a beveled edge door. And it's a very common question that you're going to get on hinges when they are swing clear, when they are anchor style hinges. In the realm of just full mortise hinges, we very often just get away with the standard hinge. In this case, we're going to use McKinney as an example, the TA2714. And we're going to look at the template for this. But the bottom line is, to start this conversation, when this is a TA2714 is what this is. When we bring the leaves parallel, okay, there's a healthy margin between the leaves, and that healthy margin is going to be the gap between the edge of the door and the frame, is the bottom line. And we're going to look at that template. When the leaves are brought parallel, there's going to be a distance between the leaves, and that's a result of the swag on the hinge leaves, meaning how the leaves are bent. How the leaves are bent determine the behavior or characteristics of the hinge. Okay. Now, here is a TA4314. If you kind of memorize in your brain what that looks like when those leaves are parallel, there's a healthy margin between there. Let's look at the same hinge as a TA2314. When I bring those leaves parallel, you probably notice that there's a far smaller gap. And that's because the leaves basically are not parallel, because they can't be brought parallel, because one leaf of the hinge has a different bend to it in comparison to the other leaf. When I bring these leaves parallel, there's a lot smaller margin, and that's because when it's installed, it's really meant to be more like that, where the gap up at the top is X, but the gap down at the bottom is Y, and that is to take into account the fact that this leaf appears to be square, this leaf, the other leaf, that appears to be at an angle, like you'd see on a beveled edge door. The bottom line is, if you were to try to install a hinge meant for a square edge door onto a beveled edge door, you can tighten the screws up and it's probably going to work. But if you've ever wondered at the mystery of why margins on the hinge side of the jamb and the lock side of the jamb are always a little odd and weird and different, and it's because of that. Now, when you deal with an anchor hinge or a swing clear hinge, the way that they bend those leaves is absolutely necessary to specify that at the time of order, because you'll get into a situation where it just won't work. Let's take a little deeper dive into what we can expect this to look like when we're using, let's say, a square edge meant hinge like a TA2714 on a beveled edge door, and we'll start by looking at the catalog and the templates. Let's do that now. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Okay, let's dive into the manufacturer's catalog, and we'll see if we can determine. Yeah, I don't have a 4314 in the catalog, TA2714. Let's dive in, let's take a look. Okay, the manufacturer's page, let's open up the full line catalog. TA2714. Alright, full mortise application. Here's what it looks like. Specifically, this is what we're talking about. So you'll take note that the hinge is not drawn completely flush with the frame, but the distance from here to here is going to be that 1/8 of an inch. Okay. If I measure the distance between these two leaves, it'll be shy of that, maybe closer to 3/32. So let's see if we have a link to a template here for that. Yeah, well, it's actually a 1/16. So there you go. In this case, the hinge does stand proud of the preparation ever so slightly. But in your mind's eye, if you imagine rotating this leaf 3 degrees to be parallel with a beveled edge door, you might get the concept that the way that the door is going to hang in the frame isn't going to be true to how it would normally need to hang. You've got that leaf standing out much further this way, that when you push the door closed, you can definitely see how you can have the potential for the door to be hinge bound, and that's because this leaf is going to be pinched closed towards the frame leaf, and that's when you're using the square edge prepped hinge on a beveled edge door. Now let's take a dive and see if we can find a template for the TA2314, and a reference to that. Let's go back to the catalog to see what they're talking about. So let's search for I'm sorry, I said 2314, I meant 4314. And here it is, 5 knuckle standard weight hinge for beveled edge door. Yeah, so when you have a TA2714, but you want to do a beveled edge door, you're going to specify 4314 and or 4714. And I can see what occurred there. Yeah, okay. So what I've got here is a hinge. Yeah, so we've got a TA4314 that happens to be a stainless based material. Just doesn't matter. But when you're dealing with beveled edge doors, you're going to want to pay close attention to this. And McKinney does a really good job in the sense that they actually supply hinges for this type of application. I'll see if there is a reference for us here on this. And let's just take a look and see if they show us what their hinge looks like. Yeah, here's a great example. This happens to be a raised barrel hinge, but it just doesn't matter that it's a raised barrel. Perfect example of a square edge prep, and then an example of a beveled edge prep. You can see if we try to take this hinge and stick it on this application, down in here, it's going to get awfully close to touching, and it just does. And I can show you on the screen view, pardon me, on the camera view, that the gap between there is exceptionally tiny. Well, let's do that. Let's switch back to the camera view. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it. All right, here's that 4314. When I pinch those leaves together, there's practically no room inside of here. And, you know, it needs to be more like that so that it can breathe a little bit, but that's far too close. I'd have no chance of really telling you. I guess that's about 18 thousandths or 20 thousandths of an inch inside of there. Okay, think of it as, take a 64th of an inch, divide that by 3. That's about the gap between there. So that is just positively incorrect in the sense that if you tried to put a hinge on a beveled edge hinge onto a square edge door, it really wouldn't work very well. Now, you're not going to do that with a full mortise hinge in a typical application, but if you're tempted to order a swing clear hinge or an anchor hinge for that application, you've got a really expensive hinge now, especially an anchor hinge. You need to specify the right hinge for it, is just, I guess, what we're driving at. So the client was asking questions like, been told they should bevel the non-hinge edge of the door, understood that it's recommended to bevel both styles, and questioning why that's the case. If beveling the lock edge of the door, why does that necessarily translate into needing to also bevel the hinge edge? It doesn't. Not at all. If beveling both edges, would you be creating a parallelogram or a trapezoid? I think a trapezoid, right? Different hinges are made for beveled edges and non-beveled edges, so the client would like to have answers before proceeding. We answered it. It's okay. It's going to work. If I was specifying, as I'd said, I'd specify a beveled edge manufactured hinge. Don't know if anyone can make it on a wide throw. I just have never been asked the question. Okay, that's it. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it. So I've changed my mind. I'm going to do a deep dive into the beveled versus non-beveled hinge. Unfortunately, it'll be a McKinney hinge that we're going to look at, an RB TA2714. Unfortunately, McKinney does not have CAD drawings, So I'm going to receive a physical sample of each hinge. I have the templates. I'm going to recreate the hinge in AutoCAD because I want to be able to see what that hinge leaf looks like when we've got a hinge intended for a square edge door installed on a door with a 3-degree bevel. I want to be able to see that. And that's where this video is going now. So there you go. Let's move on. So before we take a look at AutoCAD, I've got the template pulled up here, and this is for the TA2714 type hinge. The important part is it's just showing us an instance where a square edge door is going to be what this hinge would be used on. But if you start to think about attaching this hinge to a beveled edge door, you start to think, gosh, I'm not really sure if that's the best way to go, because when you rotate this hinge leaf, are you going to be achieving the right sort of angle? And that's really what the study is. Is this going to allow us the proper margin and the proper point of rotation to get that 3-degree moved over? So with that being said, let's take a look at a couple little things in AutoCAD here that will allow us to perhaps understand this a little bit better. What I have here is a couple of objects that are just meant to look like the edge of a door, basically. Obviously a square edge door and then a beveled edge door down here. I've got some geometric shapes here, some shapes that look like the hinge from our template here. And then I have a hinge that would be the TA4314, where that leaf is swagged differently, meaning the bend on the hinge leaf, which I haven't drawn here, but the bend on the hinge leaf is what's going to be different. So let's do the obvious one first. We're going to take this, we're going to move this, and we're going to see once we move this in place, theoretically, that looks perfect. That hinge fits exactly in there. That's what you're expecting to see, right? So let's do the obvious with our TA4314. So we've got that beveled edge hinge there. Looks great. Looks exactly the way it's supposed to look. So let's try the obvious. So what people are obviously doing is using the TA2714, and they're sticking it onto a radiused edge door. And when you do that, you get the concept that it's just not really ideal, because when you end up getting this hinge in place down here, you're going to end up rotating in order to get this leaf over here, and that is a really small dimension. Well, it's actually not that small. In order to get that leaf to bend, or to rotate, not to bend, you're inherently going to be moving this pivot point over slightly. And when I grab the other hinge, the beveled edge hinge, this is my new location of where that new hinge is. That's my new center point. So it changes the geometry of what you're working on. But what's important to note is what I've done here, I've taken a TA2714 and I've rotated that leaf 3-degree so that this leaf will run parallel to the beveled edge door. But what's actually happening is this TA2714, when it becomes a TA4314, it's a different animal. Let's discuss that. So what happens is I've got a line that's the correct length of the leaf. I've got it at 93 degrees is what it actually is. Then we know we're going to do 0.134. And we're just going to run at 87 degree. Yeah, that works. So that leaf's a little long because I didn't remember what I had made this leaf length. It just doesn't matter for what we're doing. Okay, so the crucial thing here is, and it's minutia, but you may be able to start to see it when the bend on the leaf itself changes. Rather than taking a standard hinge and just rotating it like I did here, I rotated it around the center point. What's happening is there's a micro difference in the width that's achieved here. Let's take a look at what that is. So measure distance 0.082. 0.082 is what that was. Let's do the same trick over here. 0.0653. 0.082 minus 0.0653. That's 0.0167. That's a 64th of an inch is what we're talking about. Now, everybody's seeing this video saying, who cares about a 64th? No one does. And this is why this hinge is used, and it works. But the point of the matter is, what it would be, and I don't have a cause either way, but if I was interested in doing it via best practice, I would always be ordering TA4314 type hinges, because there's a 64th of an inch over here, between here and here. Have you ever had to take a hollow metal door and grind it? And grinding off that small amount got the door to close? Yes, you have. There's your grinding right there, in my opinion. So this is what we're drawing attention to. You know, the center right here. So at the end of the day, we can take this hinge and we can move it and get it tucked in really nice right there. And that's going to be awesome. That's what we want to see. What we don't want to see because they're not in the same position is what I'm driving at. Yeah, the height of the pin, that's because my lengths are wrong. It's this dimension here is what we're talking about. The hinge is in a different place, and that shows it. Roughly, it shows it. Awesome. Let's wrap up this video on camera. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Where this video started out at with the original question is whether or not to bevel a door. It's been weeks since this email started, and where I am weeks later with the AutoCAD component you just saw. You should bevel it. I'm sure that I talked about how relieving the inside edge allows you more clearance as the door closes. And a lot of people don't want the hinge side beveled. And it's probably because subconsciously they realized hinges weren't swagged differently, would be my guess. You know, they're accustomed to using hinges that aren't relieved like this differently than a standard hinge. And it's easy to tell the difference between them. It's because of the gap up at the top. You know, you can see this is the TA2714. It's consistent there. You can pick that out by looking at it. When you bring these together, it looks different, but when you put it where it's going to normally exist, you can see it's a tighter margin up there. I don't have to show that to you in AutoCAD for you to see that. You can just see that one is tighter. This one is tighter. Smaller margin. Let's take a look at one more AutoCAD experiment just to talk about whether or not to bevel the edge of a door. Let's see if I can do this quickly without really taking up a whole lot of your time. What I'm going to do here is, let's do a couple of things. So what I've done here is I've just drawn, you know, something that will emulate a frame. So let's take our standard TA2714 and let's move that. Actually, no, not just yet. What I need is a line. I'll show you why I have that in a moment. So what that is the 5/16 dimension of our stop. Our door will fit in here 1/4 inch with a 1/16 of an inch margin. Trim. Okay, now let's bring our door over here. Okay, awesome. Now, I'm going to pause this so I can make some better headway. So what I'm doing is I'm building a second frame, and we're going to place the proper hinge here with the door. Okay. Okay, now I've got a cross section of I've got a square edge door drawn here and a beveled edge door with a with a standard hinge. It doesn't have the, wait a minute. No, I did use the TA4314, assuming we're using the best hinge for the project. So now, let's do this. Let's rotate. Let's select our objects. We're going to specify our point of rotation. See, when that door closes, you know, it doesn't leave us a lot of room inside of here. So, do you want a square edge door? You might. I mean, you're going to have the designed gap of 1/16 of an inch, which is here. Bear with me. I'm just pulling up the template. You're going to have that 1/16. If that's what you want, awesome. Order it square edge on that side. And I just spoke to a wood door manufacturer about a 3'6" by 10 foot, 2 1/4 inch, double hardwood stiles and rails, LSL or structural lumber core, plain slice select maple slab. Guy wants it beveled on the lock side only. Okay, so now let's do the same trick with our beveled edge door. Select our objects. I don't have that grouped apparently. Okay, enter, select our point of rotation, and we bring that in. We bring the door to close. The bottom line is, what margin do you want here? Do you want the designed 1/16 of an inch, or do you want a little bit of margin? And I can tell you that there's margin there. We've got the space between here is the distance of one major line, roughly. The distance in here is over almost 3 times that margin of relief. What do you want? I see no reason not to relieve that edge. I just see no reason not to relieve that edge. Also, in the modern day of weather stripping, you want to try to crush your weather stripping down into a nominal size of 1/16, or would you like to have room for it to not be thoroughly crushed? You know, you get my point there. If you're going to put adhesive teardrop shape in here, you know, do you want to crush it here? I would say go with the margin. You know, because this client's door is going to be 41 13/16. He's going to have only 3/32 gap over here and here. It's only, you know, it's too small of a distance to care about. But I guess this is an extension of what we were talking about earlier. When you rotate that through space, you can see it a little bit better and what you're left with when you rotate that. And what do you want to be left with? Give yourself a healthy margin, I would say. All right, now for sure, for real, let's wrap this up on video, on camera. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it. Now, we sure did a proper deep dive into the difference between a TA2714 and a TA4314 hinge. You know, obviously the TA2714, the typical BB1279, the 5BB1, the PB80, the BB81, and every other hinge manufacturer in the world, all the several and many part numbers, too many to remember. Most don't make a hinge that's got that swag on it for a 3 degree. And a downside of it would be, you know, they're going to be handed. So, you know, you're going to do this or you're going to do this. You know, you've got a button tip here with a hole in it. Contractors are not going to want that up at the top of the opening. No one would. So if you're going to be doing TA4314s, order them handed so that you get that button in the right end of the hinge. But you're ordering the door handed, the frame is handed, the closer may be handed, the exit device may be handed, the lock could be handed. Why not order the hinges handed? Everything else on the opening is kind of handed anyway. And when you send those hinges for that opening, you're good. It's going to make you tag it, because if you've got 5 doors, 2 lefts and 3 rights, now you're tagging hinge boxes. And it could be the only thing that you're tagging, because you've got, you know, non-handed closers and exit devices. But at the end of the day, if we're striving to do it the best way we can, if we can introduce complexity into our workflow at no additional cost to ourselves, I take that to be, if you can make yourself better and it doesn't cost you anything, do it that way. Order the hinges handed. It doesn't cost. I don't mean cost. I mean, if there's not an expenditure of additional energies, if you can elevate what you're doing, go ahead and elevate it. In my opinion, even though it's micro, you're elevating by ordering beveled edge hinges, and we've demonstrated the actual difference why, and then the original question whether or not to bevel the style of a door. Anyway, any questions on this or anything else hardware related, please feel free to reach out to me. My name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. Thank you. Thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.